Special thanks to my latest Patreon supporter, Talus, a great bone in the body. Do you like running your combats using theater of the mind? Because I do. But I understand that a lot of people find it difficult to maintain an accurate visual image of the scene through an entire combat. So here are 2 techniques that I use to make theater of the mind much easier to visualize. There's a rule in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition which can be applied to any edition of Dungeons & Dragons as a way to help the Dungeon Master organize the battlefield in their mind. This incredible rule looks like this. As you can see here, the rules for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition assume a hex grid rather than a square grid when it comes to combat. When enemies engage a character in melee combat, they always fill these slots in order as they approach their target. Once those slots are full, no more enemies can approach the target. Even ranged attacks and melee attacks with greater reach fail once all of these positions are filled because they can't pass through the enemies occupying those positions. And this is where our vintage battle map rule benefits theater of the mind. Once we understand that only 6 enemies can be engaged with one target at a given time, they become easier to manage, even without miniatures. Enemies 1 through 3 are attacking from the front, enemies 4 and 5 are flanking, and enemy 6 is attacking from the rear. Because tracking positions is the most difficult task in any theater of the mind combat, this system allows the Dungeon Master to simplify positions into a smaller chunk of information they can then apply to specific characters. In editions other than 2nd edition, this kind of simplification can cause a combat to lose some of the granular details a battle map provides. But that simplification allows the Dungeon Master the space they need to better describe the scene where the action is taking place. And most players, especially those who prefer theater of the mind, are going to remember the descriptive narration of the combat long after they've forgotten the rules-driven granularity of their tactical choices. Of course, remembering which specific enemies are in these positions can be a bit more difficult. But I have a personal method for dealing with that, and it's one that doesn't come from an older edition of the game. Differentiating enemies of the same type can be a challenge. Most of the time, a dungeon master running Theater of the Mind just numbers the enemies in their head. Goblin 1, Goblin 2, Goblin 3, and so on. Meanwhile, dungeon masters running combat on a battle map have an easier time because their players are probably just pointing at enemy miniatures and giving them creative names like this one and that one over there. The problem is that these disposable enemies of the same type often end up nameless and faceless once combat begins, and this makes them especially difficult to track in Theater of the Mind. Attempting to track a nameless and faceless group of enemies usually ends up sounding like, "You encounter 5 goblins, who immediately rush you. I attack the one that's closest to me. Okay, that'll be, yeah. Okay, roll your attack." And so on, until the combat ends. My solution to this has always been to give these enemies names and faces. Or more specifically, I give them faces that can be used as names. Sort of like the way the 7 dwarves are named in the Disney film. "You encounter 5 goblins, who immediately rush you. We'll call them Short, Bald, Laughing, Eye Patch, and Mustache. I draw my blade. It's time to give Mustache a shave. All right, roll to attack." It's a great technique. It helps me hold the scene in my head more effectively, it helps the players remember who they're engaging with more effectively, and it honestly just makes combats more fun. And the fun is always what we remember longest.
Thanks for watching. I hope you found the video helpful. And if you did find it helpful and you're not already a subscriber, why not click subscribe? And if you are already a subscriber and in a position to help the channel financially, why not swing on down to Patreon, where you can support me for as little as $5 a month. And if that is not within your means, never a problem. You can always share the video to your favorite social media platform. I cannot explain to you how much that helps. Thanks a lot, and I hope you're doing all right. Have a good one.